So, guys, Cowboys football is finally back, and tonight we get our first real look at this team against the Seahawks. Throughout minicamp and training camp, we've seen some really encouraging signs, especially from this defense and some of the young players. But we've also seen a few questions develop, particularly with offensive line depth in some of these roster battles. Now, all of that talk gets put to the test in the preseason opener because we finally get real game reps, and there's one big question I'm watching tonight. So, let me break down what I'm watching for, which players have the most to prove, and what this game could finally tell us about the Cowboys. What's up, Cowboys Nation? Welcome to the NFL Playbook Cowboys. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Look, let's be real. We've been talking about practices for weeks now, who won a rep, who got beat, who looked good in shorts and helmets. But tonight's different, because it actually counts. Brian Schottenheimer already said it. He's bucketing guys into groups for tonight, and your big names like Dak Prescott, George Pickens, CeeDee Lamb, they're probably not playing much, if at all. Tonight belongs to the guys fighting for a roster spot, and honestly, that's exactly what I want to watch. So, let's start up front, because to me, this is the biggest concern heading into tonight. The offensive line depth behind the starters is still a huge question mark for this team. We know who the starting five is, more or less, but it's what happens after that group that worries me. Shelton is the name everybody keeps bringing up, and for good reason. He's a guy that, if he played the entire game tonight, I honestly wouldn't be mad about it. He needs these reps, especially if he's going to be this team's swing tackle. I've heard he's still working through some strength and technique stuff. Guys getting into his chest and moving him off his spot a little bit, so I want to see if he can hold his ground against some unfamiliar competition. But it's not just about Shelton tonight. Nate Thomas is also in that mix, and honestly, I see him almost like a guy who has to fight to get back into this coaching staff's good graces. He wasn't the one who drafted him, so he's kind of playing from behind a little bit. And then you've got Nick Leverett too, who I have to admit has quietly jumped up this depth chart. I keep hearing his name mentioned around camp, and for a guy in his 5th year in this league, that tells me he might be one of those steady veteran presences that keeps this line from completely falling apart if injuries hit. So tonight, I'm watching all 3 of these guys, Shelton, Nate Thomas, and Nick Leverett, because whoever separates themselves here is probably locking up a real roster spot. And honestly, it's not even just about who wins one-on-one reps in a drill. It's about who can hold up over an extended stretch of snaps. Because that's the kind of test this coaching staff actually cares about right now. Now let's shift over to the backfield, because this might be the juiciest battle of the entire night. Everybody knows Javonte Williams is the lead back. That's not in question. But behind him, it's Jaydon Blue and Phil Mafah fighting for that RB2 job, and I think tonight tells us a lot. For Jaydon Blue, I honestly don't care as much about the flashy runs tonight. I want to see him in pass protection. Can he pick up a blitz? Can he stay in and not have a mental bust when it matters? Because if he misses an assignment in a preseason game against backups, fine, we live with that and make an adjustment. But you can't have that happen in the regular season with Dak Prescott back there. And honestly, ball security is a factor too. He's had a fumble or 2 in practice, so I want to see him protect the football when the pads really start popping. Then you've got Phil Mafah, and from what I've gathered, he's been the more consistent, steady option throughout camp. He's not necessarily the most explosive guy, but he looks like a guy who just does his job the right way every single time. Tonight, I want to see if he can create something without the first-team offensive line blocking for him. Can he make guys miss with backups up front? Can he catch a check down or a screen and actually do something with it? Because if something happens to Javonte Williams for even a half of football, this team needs to trust that whoever is behind him can be the guy. So keep an eye on both these backs tonight, not just how many yards they get, but how they get them. All right, let's move to the other side of the ball, because the pass rush is one of the more intriguing stories of this whole camp. Sam Williams is in a strange spot right now. He's a veteran, but he's not guaranteed anything, and honestly, I think he knows it. Tonight, I want to see him get after these Seattle backups and remind everybody why he was a factor for this defense not too long ago. Then you've got Malachi Lawrence, a rookie who I think needs snaps more than almost anybody else on this roster. This is a jumping competition for him, and I want to see him win right off the jump, show some real pass rush moves, and actually finish plays instead of just getting close. And don't sleep on Isaiah Land and Tyrus Wheat either. Both of these guys have actually made rosters around this league before, so it's not like they're complete long shots here. If they're going against Seattle's second and third team guys tonight, I want to see them dominate those reps. Because if you can't beat up on backup tackles in a preseason game, it's going to be really tough to convince this coaching staff you belong on the 53-man roster. So that's 4 names to track on the edge tonight. Sam Williams, Malachi Lawrence, Isaiah Land, and Tyrus Wheat, all fighting for a handful of open spots. Now let's talk secondary, because the cornerback room has one of the more fascinating battles brewing. Caelen Carson got a ton of run throughout camp, but from what I've heard, the production just hasn't quite matched the opportunity yet. And with only a couple more preseason games left, I think he's honestly running out of time to make his case. On the other side, you got Ameer Speed, who I keep hearing described as long, rangy, and a guy who's already flashed some real ability against this receiver room in practice. Tonight feels like a big one for both of them. If Ameer Speed keeps showing out and Caelen Carson doesn't respond, I think the depth chart starts to shift pretty quickly. So watch how these two are used tonight, not just in coverage, but on special teams too, because that's often where these bottom of the roster battles actually get decided. A tackle on punt coverage or a forced fumble on kickoff can honestly mean just as much as a pass breakup in this evaluation process. Okay, now let's move over to wide receiver because honestly, this might be the most crowded position battle on the entire roster. With George Pickens, CeeDee Lamb, and the rest of that top group locked in, we're really talking about that 5th receiver spot tonight, and there's a stack of names competing for it. 2 guys I really want to focus on are Camden Brown and Anthony Smith. Camden Brown has been the guy who's kind of come out of nowhere these last few weeks, making some really impressive catches and getting reps with the 2s, maybe even some with the 1s. Tonight is his chance to show that what he's done in practice can actually translate to a real game setting against a real opponent wearing a different jersey. Anthony Smith has had his moments too throughout camp, and I think he needs a strong showing tonight to keep himself in this conversation. With this many bodies competing for really just 1 or 2 spots, tonight's game genuinely matters. A drop, a missed block, a mental error, any of that could be the difference between making this roster or heading to the practice squad. Now let's get to the tight end room, because I think this has honestly been one of the quieter battles of camp, but it's an interesting one. Michael Trigg has the physical tools, there's no doubt about that, but I don't think he's fully separated himself as a blocker yet. If he's going to make this roster, it's probably going to be because he's winning matchups against linebackers and making plays down the field, not because he suddenly becomes a dominant blocker overnight. On the other side, you've got DJ Rogers, and honestly, I don't think many people are talking about him, but I think tonight is his opportunity to change that. Neither of these guys has really stepped up yet to challenge Luke Schoonmaker for that 3rd tight end spot, so tonight is a real chance for either Michael Trigg or DJ Rogers to make a statement. If one of them can show they're a legitimate matchup problem or a real red zone threat, I think you'll start hearing their name a lot more over these next couple of weeks. So, let's bring this back to that one big question I mentioned at the top. After weeks of practice reports, mini-camp buzz, and training camp battles, tonight is really the first time we get to see if any of this translates to an actual game. Every single one of these storylines has been building for weeks, and tonight is where we actually start getting real answers instead of just practice reports and guesswork.